Hey, and welcome to Puzzlehead. This channel is all about engaging stories with clever twists, unexpected turns, and moments that will pull you in emotionally. So, if you enjoy drama, surprises, and endings that truly hit, then you're in the right place. Subscribe and join us for stories full of secrets, intense moments, and satisfying outcomes. Now, don't forget to turn on notifications. The next puzzle is about to begin.
The windshield wipers scraped against ice that had no business forming in October, but Mother Nature never consulted the calendar when she wanted to make a point. 9 hours of white-knuckle driving through what the radio kept calling an unprecedented early-season blizzard, and I was still 2 miles from home. The custom birthday cake sat secured in the back seat, chocolate ganache with raspberry filling, Rebecca's favorite since college. Cost me $300 and a 4-hour detour to the only bakery that could make it right. My name is Nathan Cross, and I'm what most people would call methodical. 15 years as a forensic accountant before transitioning to regional sales management taught me that details matter. The devil lives in them, sure, but so does the truth. I'd been rehearsing my birthday speech for the last 200 miles, practicing the words that would make Rebecca's 38th birthday perfect, despite my being away on business for 3 weeks straight. Happy birthday, sweetheart. I know I've been gone too long, but this contract in Denver was worth it. 6 figures, baby. We can finally renovate the kitchen like you wanted. The GPS announced my turn onto Maple Street. Our street. Home stretched ahead, a colonial revival we'd bought with my inheritance from Dad. Complete with the wraparound porch Rebecca had fallen in love with at first sight. Every light was on, which meant she was awake despite the late hour. Perfect. I pulled into the garage, quietly, not wanting to spoil the surprise. The cake box balanced perfectly in my hands as I fumbled for my keys. Through the thin wall separating the garage from the kitchen, I could hear voices. Rebecca and her sister Dawn laughing about something. Wine night, probably. Even better, Dawn could witness the surprise the door from the garage opened silently. I'd oiled those hinges last month. God, I hope he crashes. Rebecca's voice carried clearly across the kitchen tile. I could use the insurance money. My hand froze on the doorknob. Dawn's laugh was sharp, familiar. Or at least a few months in the hospital. Give you some breathing room to figure things out. 2.2 million, Rebecca said, and I could hear the whine in her voice. Can you believe he actually signed that policy? Men are so stupid when you stroke their ego, right? The cake box felt suddenly heavy in my hands. Through the crack in the door, I could see them at the kitchen island. Rebecca in the red silk blouse I'd bought her for Valentine's Day. Dawn in her usual black ensemble that made her look like she was perpetually attending a funeral. 2 wine glasses, nearly empty. A manila folder spread between them. The accidental passing rider was genius, Dawn continued. Double payout for vehicle accidents? And in this weather? Plausible deniability. I married a forensic accountant, Rebecca said, raising her glass in a mock toast. He taught me to think like one, every detail documented, every story airtight. I set the cake on the counter next to the door, moving like a ghost. The birthday card I'd written remained in my jacket pocket, unsigned now and forever. They never heard the door click shut. They never heard my footsteps retreat across the garage floor. They never heard my car start or the garage door close behind me. But I heard everything. 24 hours later, I sat in a diner outside Pittsburgh, staring at a cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. The waitress, name tag read Dolores, had stopped asking if I needed anything. Smart woman. She could probably smell the wreckage on me from across the room. Regional sales manager was the mask I wore for Rebecca, for her friends, for the neighbors who waved when I mowed the lawn on Saturdays. But underneath, I was still the forensic accountant who'd brought down State Senator Morrison for embezzling highway funds. Still the man who'd traced $2 million through 17 shell companies to expose the Brennan hedge fund scandal. Rebecca had married the mask. She'd never met the man. My phone buzzed. Text message from Rebecca. Where are you? Your car wasn't in the garage this morning. Call me. I turned the phone face down and pulled out my laptop. Time to become the man she'd never bothered to know. 15 years of marriage. And she thought I was stupid. 15 years of joint bank accounts, shared credit cards, and a house deed that she'd never actually read carefully. If she had, she might have noticed that Dad's inheritance came with strings attached. Specifically, a family trust that made me the sole owner regardless of marriage laws. She might have noticed that every dollar in our joint accounts came from my salary, that her interior design business was hemorrhaging money faster than a punctured artery. But Rebecca never paid attention to details. That was my job. I opened the first file, bank records, going back 5 years, every transaction categorized, every expense documented. Her business account showed a fascinating pattern. Large deposits followed immediately by transfers to personal accounts. Client payments that never corresponded to actual work completed. A shell company bleeding money while she lived like a successful entrepreneur. The second file was more interesting. Credit card statements. The Ritz-Carlton in downtown Pittsburgh, charged to her business card, dinner for two at Romano's, the expensive Italian place she claimed she'd never been to, Victoria's Secret purchases that I'd never seen her wear. A pattern of expenses that painted a very clear picture of a woman living a double life. But the third file was the masterpiece, insurance documents. She was right about the $2.2 million policy. What she didn't know was that I'd read every word before signing, including the clause that voided the policy for fraud. What she definitely didn't know was that I'd recorded our conversation with the insurance agent, including her very specific questions about accidental end benefits and payout timelines. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a call. Rebecca's photo filled the screen, the picture from our honeymoon in Cabo, when she still smiled at me, like I was her hero instead of her meal ticket. I let it go to voicemail. 3 minutes later, another buzz, the voicemail notification. I played it back, holding the phone away from my ear as her voice filled the empty diner. Nathan, this isn't funny. Where are you? I know you got back last night. Mrs. Henderson saw your car in the driveway. Call me back, now. Dolores appeared at my elbow with a fresh cup of coffee. Trouble at home, honey? You could say that. I accepted the coffee gratefully. My wife thinks I'm an idiot. Are you? I looked up at her weathered face, kind eyes that had probably seen every variety of human stupidity over the years. Not as much as she thinks. Good for you. She patted my shoulder with maternal authority. Whatever you're planning, make sure you can live with it afterward. Revenge has a way of eating people from the inside. I nodded, already knowing I was too far down this road to turn back. Rebecca wanted to play games with insurance money and accidental passing. She wanted to treat our marriage like a business transaction with me as the expendable asset. Time to show her what happened when you tried to con a forensic accountant. The law office of Peterson, Williams & Associates occupied the entire third floor of a glass building that screamed expensive by the hour. I'd been here before, 6 months ago, when the first cracks in my marriage became too obvious to ignore. James Peterson had been Dad's attorney for 30 years, which made him the closest thing I had to family advice. Nathan. He stood as his secretary showed me in, extending a hand that felt like a firm handshake wrapped around genuine concern. I got your message. Are we moving forward? We are. I settled into the leather chair across from his mahogany desk. But there's been a development. I pulled out my phone and played the recording from 2 nights ago. Rebecca's voice filled the office with casual talk of insurance payouts and hospital stays. Peterson's expression never changed, but his pen moved steadily across a legal pad. Well, he said when the recording ended, that certainly simplifies things. How long have you suspected? 6 months of concrete suspicions, probably 2 years of willful blindness before that. I handed him a thumb drive. Financial records, credit card statements, business filings for her design company. Everything you'll need. Peterson plugged in the drive and pulled up the files on his computer. His eyebrows climbed steadily as he scrolled through the data. Nathan, this is comprehensive. When did you compile all this? I never stopped. Occupational hazard. I document everything. I leaned forward. The marriage is over, James. Has been for a while. But now she's talking about insurance fraud and hoping I die in a car accident. That changes the game. It certainly does. He printed several pages and spread them across his desk. The prenup we drafted will hold up in court, especially with this evidence of financial infidelity. The house remains yours through the family trust. Joint accounts can be frozen immediately. But Nathan, he looked at me over his reading glasses. What exactly are you planning? Nothing illegal, nothing that will land me in jail, or cost me my professional reputation. I stood and walked to the window overlooking downtown. But she wants to play games with my life insurance? She's about to learn why you don't con a forensic accountant. The insurance company will need to know about this recording. They already do. I called them this morning. I turned back to face him. Fraud investigation opens Monday. Policy is suspended pending review. And James, I want divorce papers filed today. She can be served at home. Peterson nodded slowly. What about your job? You'll need income during the proceedings. Already handled. My boss knows about the situation, has for months. I'm taking extended leave, working remotely from a location to be determined. I picked up my jacket from the chair. Rebecca thinks I'm the boring husband who pays the bills and stays out of her way. She's about to find out what happens when boring decides to get interesting. Nathan, Peterson's voice carried a warning. Whatever you're planning, make sure it's legal. Revenge fantasies have a way of becoming criminal charges. I pause at the door. I'm a forensic accountant, James. I don't deal in fantasies. I deal in facts, documentation, and consequences. Rebecca wanted to treat our marriage like a business transaction? Fine. Time for the audit. The elevator ride down felt like descending into a new life. By the time I reached the parking garage, my phone was buzzing with another call from Rebecca. This time, I answered. Where the hell are you? Her voice was sharp with panic now, not just annoyance. The insurance company called. They're asking questions about our policy. What did you tell them? The truth. I climbed into my rental car. I'd traded in my regular vehicle that morning, another detail she hadn't noticed yet. Always tell the truth, Rebecca. You taught me that. Don't be cute with me. Come home. We need to talk. No, we don't. Check your email. You'll find everything you need to know. I hung up and drove toward the interstate, leaving behind 15 years of marriage and heading toward whatever came next. In my rearview mirror, the city skyline grew smaller, but my smile grew wider. The game was just beginning. Rebecca found the cake at noon on her actual birthday, sitting exactly where I'd left it on the kitchen counter. The box was still pristine, the ribbon still perfectly tied, but something about it felt wrong in the empty house. She called my name twice before the silence convinced her I wasn't hiding upstairs or in the basement workshop. That's when she noticed the other details. My coffee mug wasn't in the sink. The newspaper was still in its plastic sleeve on the front porch. The bed looked like only one person had slept in it, and my pillow was still fluffed and untouched. The closet told the real story. Empty hangers, where my suits used to hang. Missing laptop bag. The small safe behind my winter coats. Door hanging open, contents gone. My wedding ring sat centered on top of the birthday card. She'd never seen me write. The envelope still sealed. She opened it with trembling fingers. Happy birthday, sweetheart. I hope you get everything you deserve, Nathan. That's when the panic set in. I knew this because Mrs. Henderson called me at 2:30 p.m., her voice breathless with gossip and concern. Nathan, dear, Rebecca came over asking if I'd seen you leave this morning. She seemed quite upset. Is everything all right? Mrs. Henderson was 73 years old and had been our neighbor for 8 years. She also had the best view of our driveway from her kitchen window and the memory of an FBI surveillance expert. Nothing happened on Maple Street without her knowledge. We had a disagreement, I told her, choosing my words carefully. I'm staying elsewhere for a while. Oh, honey, I'm sorry to hear that. Marriage is hard work, but you two always seem so solid. She paused, and I could practically hear her gathering courage for the next question. She asked me specifically what time you left and whether you took anything with you. Seemed strange, like she was taking inventory. What did you tell her? The truth, that I saw your car leave around 6 this morning and you had a suitcase in the back seat. Was I wrong to tell her that? No, Mrs. Henderson. The truth is always right. I smiled, knowing she couldn't see it, but hoping she could hear it in my voice. Thank you for looking out for us. After I hung up, I pulled out my laptop and checked the security cameras I'd installed 6 months ago. Rebecca didn't know about them. They were hidden in smoke detectors and looked like standard safety equipment. But they'd been recording everything, uploading to a cloud server that only I could access. The footage from this morning was fascinating. Rebecca searching the house room by room, opening drawers and checking hiding places I'd never used. Her phone pressed to her ear for most of it, having animated conversations with someone who kept making her more agitated Based on her responses, I could tell she was talking to Dawn. He knows something. No, I'm sure of it. The insurance company called, Dawn. They're asking questions. What do you mean, what kind of questions? Then came the part that made everything crystal clear. Rebecca in my home office, rifling through file cabinets that she'd never shown interest in before, looking for something specific. When she didn't find it, she called Dawn back. It's gone, all of it. The financial records, the business files, even the tax returns. Dawn, he took everything. No, this isn't normal. Nathan doesn't just leave. He plans everything 6 months in advance. We need to figure out what he knows. I closed the laptop and leaned back in my hotel room chair. The Marriott in Columbus was anonymous and comfortable, exactly what I needed while I planned the next phase. Rebecca was starting to understand that her boring, predictable husband might not be as easy to manipulate as she'd thought. My phone rang. Rebecca again, for the 5th time today. This time I answered. Nathan, please, come home. We can work this out. Can we? I kept my voice neutral, professional. What exactly do you want to work out, Rebecca? Whatever this is about. Whatever you think you know. Her voice cracked slightly. I love you. We can fix this. Do you love me? Or do you love the life insurance policy? The silence stretched for 10 seconds. Then, what are you talking about? Happy birthday, Rebecca. I hope it was everything you dreamed it would be. I hung up and turned off the phone. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new moves in the game she'd started but didn't know how to finish. For tonight, I had planning to do. The forensic accountant was fully awake now, and he had work to do. Dawn Martinez had always been the smarter sister, which made her the more dangerous one. While Rebecca relied on charm and manipulation, Dawn preferred research and planning. She was the one who'd suggested the insurance policy increase. She was the one who'd researched accidental end benefits. And she was definitely the one who'd convinced Rebecca that I was too stupid to notice. What neither of them knew was that I'd been investigating Dawn for 3 months. It started as idle curiosity. Why was my sister-in-law always broke, despite having a good job as a nurse practitioner? Why did she always need to borrow money, always have some crisis that required Rebecca's help? A few database searches and public records requests painted an interesting picture. Dawn's first husband, Michael Martinez, died in a car accident 4 years ago. Single vehicle crash on a snowy night, very similar to the weather conditions Rebecca had been hoping for. The insurance payout was substantial, $1.8 million, with Dawn as the sole beneficiary. What made it even more interesting was the timing. Michael had filed for divorce 2 weeks before his passing. The papers were never served. I sat in my hotel room with 3 laptops open, pulling threads that connected to bigger threads. Dawn's financial records showed the insurance money disappearing quickly. Bad investments, gambling debts, and a cocaine habit that she'd hidden from everyone, including Rebecca. By last year, she was broke again and looking for another solution. Enter Nathan Cross, the boring brother-in-law with excellent life insurance. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. We need to talk. D. Dawn had gotten my number from Rebecca, obviously. I typed back, nothing to discuss. I know what you think you know. You're wrong. Am I? Meet me tonight, neutral ground. 1 hour. I considered ignoring her, but curiosity won. Dawn was the architect of this scheme, which made her the most dangerous piece on the board. Better to know what she was planning than to let her operate in shadows. Denny's on Route 40, 1 hour. The Denny's was perfect, public enough to be safe, private enough for conversation, and populated with the kind of late-night crowd that minded their own business. I arrived 15 minutes early and chose a booth with clear sightlines to all entrances. Old habits from my investigation days. Dawn walked in exactly on time, scanning the restaurant until she spotted me. She looked tired, older than her 35 years, with the kind of stress lines that came from living too many lives for too long. Nathan. She slid into the booth across from me, declining the waitress's offer of coffee. You look good for a dead man. Sorry to disappoint you. Cut the crap. What do you want? I leaned back and studied her face. I want to understand why you thought I was stupid enough to fall for this. Fall for what? But her eyes flickered just for a second. The grieving widow routine worked once. Michael Martinez, 4 years ago, single car accident, snowy night, convenient timing, right before divorce papers were served. I watched her face go pale. But you burned through that money faster than you expected, didn't you? Bad investments, worse habits. So you needed another husband to have an accident. Dawn's hands were shaking now, but she kept her voice steady. You can't prove anything. I don't have to prove anything about Michael. The statute of limitations hasn't run out, and I've already sent everything to the state police. They'll reopen the investigation based on what I've given them. I leaned forward. But Rebecca? That's attempted insurance fraud, conspiracy, and if anything had actually happened to me, it would have been homicide. She didn't mean it. It was just talk, just planning my end for money. I have it recorded, Dawn. Every word. The fight went out of her like air from a punctured balloon. She slumped in the booth, looking older and smaller than when she'd walked in. What do you want? She whispered. I want you to disappear. Tonight. Leave town, leave the state, and never contact Rebecca again. I slid a piece of paper across the table. This is a confession. Sign it and I'll give you a 12-hour head start before I turn it over to the police. She read the document, her hands shaking harder with each line. It was comprehensive. Her role in planning the insurance fraud, her history with Michael's passing, her manipulation of Rebecca. Everything that would put her in prison for the next 20 years. And if I don't sign, then you can explain everything to Detective Morrison when he arrives in about 10 minutes. I called him before you got here. Dawn looked around the restaurant like a trapped animal, then back at the confession. She picked up the pen with trembling fingers. Rebecca really loves you, you know. She's just lost. Rebecca chose her side when she started planning my funeral. I watched her sign the document, then folded it carefully into my jacket pocket. You have 12 hours, Dawn. Use them wisely. She stood up without another word and walked out of the restaurant. Through the window, I watched her get into her car and drive away, probably forever, one piece off the board. But the game was far from over. 3 weeks after I disappeared, Rebecca finally understood the scope of what she'd lost. The divorce papers were served on a Tuesday morning by a sheriff's deputy who apologized for the early hour, but explained that legal documents didn't keep bankers' hours. Rebecca signed for them in her bathrobe, still half asleep and completely unprepared for what she was about to read. I wasn't there to see her reaction, but I had other sources. She went white as a sheet, Mrs. Henderson told me during our weekly phone call, stood there in the doorway, reading those papers for 10 minutes while the deputy waited. Then she started crying right there on the front porch. I felt bad for her, Nathan, even knowing what she did. The prenup we'd signed 15 years ago was ironclad, drafted by the best family law attorney Dad's money could buy. Rebecca got half of our joint assets, which amounted to about $12,000 after I'd moved my salary to a separate account. She got none of the house, none of my retirement accounts, and none of the life insurance policy that was now under federal investigation for fraud. What she did get was a business that was hemorrhaging money and a sister who'd vanished without explanation, leaving behind a confession that implicated them both in conspiracy to commit insurance fraud. My phone rang at 8:30 a.m. Rebecca, of course. Nathan, please, I know you're angry, but this is insane. You can't just destroy our entire life because of something I said when I was drunk. I'm not destroying anything, I said, stirring sugar into my coffee in a diner outside Nashville. I'm just removing myself from the equation. You wanted me gone, remember? I didn't mean it. God, Nathan, it was just talk. Stupid, awful talk, but not real. I would never actually hurt you. But you would take out a life insurance policy and hope I had an accident. You would plan how to spend the money while I was still alive. You would involve your sister in plotting my end. I kept my voice calm, professional. Those aren't the actions of someone who loves me, Rebecca. Those are the actions of someone who sees me as a financial asset. Where's Dawn? She's not answering her phone. Her apartment is empty. Her job says she quit without notice. What did you do? I gave her a choice. She made the smart one. The silence stretched long enough that I thought she might have hung up. Then, what do you want from me? Money? I don't have any. An apology? I'm sorry, Nathan. I'm so damn sorry I can't even breathe. What do you want? I want you to understand consequences, I said. For 15 years, you made choices without thinking about consequences. You spent money we didn't have on a business that didn't work. You lived like we were wealthy when we were barely middle class. You talked about my end like it was a business opportunity. Actions have consequences, Rebecca. You're learning that now. The insurance company froze the policy. They're saying there might be criminal charges. There might be. Nathan, please, I can't go to prison. I'm not strong enough for that. For just a moment, I felt something that might have been pity. The woman I'd married 20 years ago wouldn't have been capable of this kind of calculation. But that woman had been gone for a long time, replaced by someone who saw relationships as transactions and people as resources. You should have thought about that before you started planning my funeral. I hung up and turned off the phone. Tomorrow I would drive to my new city, start my new job, begin my new life. Rebecca would face whatever consequences came from her choices. Dawn would run until she found somewhere to hide, or until the law caught up with her, and I would finally be free of both of them. The waitress refilled my coffee without being asked. "Long night, honey?" "Long 15 years," I said, "but it's over now." She patted my shoulder with the kind of maternal kindness that reminded me there were still good people in the world. Well then, here's to new beginnings. I raised my coffee cup in a toast to the empty diner. To new beginnings. Outside, snow was starting to fall again, but this time I wasn't driving through it. This time I was safe and warm, watching it through a window while I planned my future instead of mourning my past. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. 6 months later, I was living in a city where nobody knew my name or my story. The accounting firm of Bradley and Associates had hired me based on my reputation and experience, no questions asked about my recent divorce or sudden relocation. My apartment was small but comfortable, with a view of the river and enough space for the simple life I was building. I kept the birthday cake recipe, though I'd never made it. Some things were better left as memories of who I used to be. The final divorce decree arrived on a Thursday, along with a letter from James Peterson updating me on the aftermath. Rebecca had avoided criminal charges by cooperating fully with the insurance investigation and paying substantial fines. Her business had folded completely, and she'd moved back in with her parents in Ohio. Dawn had been arrested in Nevada on an outstanding warrant related to Michael's passing, but that was no longer my concern. I filed the papers in a folder marked Previous Life and went back to work. My new colleagues were good people, professional, competent, and refreshingly drama-free. Sarah Chen, the senior partner, had taken me under her wing and was teaching me the peculiarities of corporate accounting in a way that made me remember why I'd loved this work in the first place. Mike Rodriguez in the cubicle next to mine had become something approaching a friend, someone to grab lunch with and complain about clients who thought accounting was magic rather than mathematics. "You seem different," Sarah observed one afternoon as we reviewed quarterly reports for a manufacturing client. "Lighter somehow, like you've been carrying something heavy and finally put it down." "Something like that." I initialed the bottom of a reconciliation sheet and moved to the next file. "Divorce will do that to you. Bad one? The worst, but it's over now." She nodded with the wisdom of someone who'd survived her own share of personal disasters. "The best revenge is living well, you know, building something better than what you lost." I looked around the office, clean, organized, filled with people who did honest work for honest pay, and realized she was right. This wasn't just a job or a place to hide, it was a foundation for whatever came next. That evening, I drove to the grocery store to buy ingredients. Not for Rebecca's birthday cake, but for something new. A recipe I'd never tried, flavors I'd never explored, a dessert that belonged to my future instead of my past. At the checkout line, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. For a moment, my chest tightened with old anxiety. Then I read the message. "Nathan, this is Mrs. Henderson. I hope you're well. Rebecca moved out last week. The house has been sold. I wanted you to know that she left something for you on the front porch, a small box with your name on it. Should I forward it to your attorney?" I typed back, "No, thank you, Mrs. Henderson. Whatever it is, I don't need it anymore, but thank you for letting me know. Take care of yourself, dear. You deserve to be happy." I turned off the phone and finished checking out. The cashier, a young woman with kind eyes, smiled as she handed me my receipt. "Having a party?" she asked, noting the cake ingredients. "No," I said, surprising myself with how good it felt to say it. "Just celebrating." "What's the occasion?" I thought about it as I loaded groceries into my car. What was the occasion? The end of a marriage that had been dead for years? The beginning of a life that was finally, completely mine? The simple fact that I'd survived something that was supposed to destroy me. "New beginnings," I said finally. At home, I followed the recipe carefully, measuring ingredients with the precision that had served me well in accounting and life. The cake rose perfectly in the oven, filling my apartment with the smell of vanilla and possibility. While it cooled, I made buttercream frosting from scratch, something I'd never attempted before, but had always wanted to try. The finished product wasn't perfect, the layers were slightly uneven, and my decorating skills needed work. But it was mine, made in my kitchen with my hands, for my celebration of a life that belonged entirely to me. I cut a small slice and ate it standing at my kitchen window, looking out at the city lights reflecting on the river. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new chances to build something worthwhile. But tonight was for appreciating how far I'd come from that snowy night when I'd walked into my house with a birthday cake and walked out with the truth. The cake was sweet, but not as sweet as freedom. I raised my fork in a toast to the empty apartment. Happy birthday to me. Outside, it started to rain. Gentle spring rain that washed the world clean and made everything smell like new growth. I watched it streak down the windows and thought about Rebecca, probably sitting in her childhood bedroom in Ohio, wondering how her careful plans had gone so wrong. But that was her story to figure out. Mine was just beginning. I finished my cake, washed the dishes, and went to bed in my own apartment, in my own city, in my own life. For the first time in years, I slept through the night without dreaming of car crashes or life insurance policies or voices planning my passing in the next room. I dreamed instead of roads I'd never traveled, leading to places I'd never been, full of possibilities I'd never imagined when I was too busy being the man everyone else needed me to be. When I woke up, I was still smiling.